Hey folks, Rob Flux with another real deal on the field with one of my former students, Krishna, with his latest deal in the suburb of Beaumaris in Melbourne. Mate, this is an absolute cracking deal and something that most people won't have actually come across. It's actually two lots individually, but there's a really huge property that's sitting over the top of it. 10 NDIS units, mate. What did you see as the opportunity here?
We saw it as a cash flow opportunity, renting it out, land holding. There's 10 units. When we purchased it, we had 10 people living in these apartments, on these units, and so that was a real motivation.
So, and all of those people being NDIS, some of those people have been 10, 15 and even 20 years living in the property, so safe and secure revenue stream, but you also saw the long-term opportunity here.
Yeah.
That long-term opportunity being the ability to demolish the actual property and sell either as vacant land, as townhouses, or even build brand new homes. So it had 3 or 4 different exit strategies on the property. What was the exit strategy that you finally went ahead with, and what was the reason behind that?
You're right, Rob. The site presented multiple exit strategies, not just one, and that made the site de-risk the site quite a bit. So the cash flow was one of the biggest primary exit strategy for us, and hold it for 5-6 years. When the market was in the right condition, we were going to exit at that stage, and whatever opportunities that presented at that stage would have been what we would consider. But as closer to where we were getting to the settlement, we ended up receiving an unsolicited offer on one of the 2 blocks, and that made our valuation, brought our valuation a lot forward, 3 years forward than what we were forecasting it, which made sense for us to move forward with that.
So the original plan was hold it for 3 or 4 years, but that offer that you thought you'd get in 3 or 4 years' time came today.
Yeah.
Take the easy money, mate. So there's a concept, folks, called highest and best use. There were 4 or 5 different ways to actually exit this particular deal. Highest and best use is the most amount of money with the least amount of hassle in the least amount of time, and the least amount of time is basically do it straight away. So
yeah, and it was a good strategy for everyone involved, the investors involved, and for us, and for the property itself. It's a very tight held suburb, so it was a high demand.
So essentially, to unlock that opportunity, given that there are actually 2 adjacent properties side by side, it's fundamentally demolish the house and then just install some services, so sewer and water and that sort of thing, just to make sure that the new incoming purchaser can actually, I guess, construct on the new the property, because the services were set up, I guess, for those 10 units, so it's not really set up for individual house blocks. There was an interesting twist to this. So whilst these 2 came on the market with one owner, next door also came up for sale at the exact same time for a different owner. Now, where this is really interesting, whilst they were different owners, there's a little bit of an overlap with these properties, with the property boundaries being a little bit blurred, wasn't there?
Yeah. So the properties are somewhat interconnected. There's a bit of an interface through the veranda along the length of this property. And I think over the years, they've used the whole complex for one individual purpose. However, different separate owners, they've owned it. And when it did come up to the market, one went to the market, the other one decided they want to exit at the same point, and they all came to the market. When we looked at it, this particular side, the 3rd block, just did not add any value. It was risking our whole project a lot more, but was not de-risking it. It was no leverage that we could use that, and we eventually decided just to stick to these ones, which had the most amount of outcome and the risk value. And when we're entering into a project of this size, risk is a huge factor in what we consider. So we decided to just stick to just these 2 and not worry about that one.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to do a little bit of a walkthrough of the property just as we're talking through this, but it was a functional property at the time. You've already started the process of demolition at the moment, so it's not in the same condition that it was when you picked it up. But give us some insights into what you saw with regards to the condition of the property at the time, and even with holding it for a couple of years, there was still a little bit of work to kind of keep that operational.
Absolutely. We budgeted for a few $100,000 for a refurbishment if we were going to go down that strategy, and that worked out quite well as well. It worked perfect, stacked up in sort of numbers. Because it was an NDIS property, most of the property was up to standard in terms of fire, electrical, plumbing, air conditioning. It was in compliance with all the Victorian tenancy laws, so it was all compliant at that stage. So most of the cosmetic stuff, we had to change the carpets, we had to repaint the whole thing, and
so just tired.
Just tired. needed to be freshened up, which was an attractive part of it because they were really good bones.
Yeah, really good bones, absolutely. So let's go and take a look inside. We can actually see, whilst we've actually started to dismantle the property somewhat, a couple of little tips and tricks with regards to sites just like this. So let's come out the back and see on the other side. Okay, here we are in the courtyard of, I guess, the 10 units, mate. And if we have a look around, it's kind of in a U shape that's going around. And you can see, I guess, from an access perspective, it is an older type complex. Do you know any idea how long this had actually been around?
We suspect it's 40 years old, and there was a upgrade or a major renovation done around early 2000s, I think, and the class of the building was changed at that time. So, and there's been some other renovations that have been done, maybe in the last 5 years, just judging by all the air conditioning unit and heating and cooling systems. They've been regularly upgrading the building from what they can.
Yeah, and what we touched on before was that the boundary is pretty much shared with an adjacent property next door. So literally right next door, you can see this little shared covered way right here. Half of that is on one boundary and half of it is on the other, but they've used this as one functional unit, even though two separate owners actually running it and two charities running the two different sides of the business. So interesting from that side of things that they kind of came together to make that happen, but that makes complications at the point of sale.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things that are unknown and needed to be resolved, but the real value was in the land. The land value presented as a very good value for us, which was the motivating factor and the de-risking factor in the whole thing. Yes, the interface was there, obviously something we haven't dealt before. We didn't think it was a big of an issue. We thought we could solve those problems, and we were able to solve them relatively quickly. But we couldn't think about all these things ahead of time, and which may hold us back in actually pulling the trigger.
Yeah. Now they've actually started the demolition process here. So when we actually have a look around, you're going to see little bits of the buildings that have actually been pulled apart, and some of the services that they've actually started to, I guess, pull off and sail off. That's actually the demolition crew trying to salvage some of that in order to make the demolition itself a little bit cheaper. So it's a very, very common practice, folks, to find opportunities to recycle with things like air conditioning and stoves and cooktops and all sorts of things like that, sometimes second-hand kitchens. But equally, there was some asbestos in the property as well. So you can see different elements where all the eaves have been taken out. And equally, if you look behind us, you'll see that the roof itself, they've actually taken all the clay tiles off. They're going to be selling those second-hand as well. So there's always opportunity to try and recycle and get the most out of a property. Now, this unsolicited offer that came to you, mate, like you said, it was unsolicited. How did they even know that you had the property and what your plans were? How did that come about?
Well, that obviously came about through the network of the agents that we've been, in contact with for over the years, and that essentially meant that when we purchased this lot, most of the agents in the area knew that we were the new owners of this big site, and having a site of this size, 1,300 square metres in a very tight-held suburb, it won't go unnoticed. Yeah. So, and when in conversations, we were quite open with how our exit plan was going to be with some of these agents, and luckily they had a client who was looking to do particular development or build something, and they raised it with us, and that's how it went about.
Yeah, and why not, mate? So now you said 1,300 odd square metres, which means that each block individually is about 650-ish. That gave you lots of opportunity. You could have done townhouses. You could have separated each title onto their own. Could have also done some duplexes and that sort of thing. Whilst in doing all those permutations, what were some of the factors that you were actually considering as to what you thought was going to be the best exit? We know that you're thinking timing-wise, you might hold on to it and wait for the market to lift. But what were the factors that you were looking in with regards to hassle factor, timeline, cost to actually construct, etc.?
I think mainly there were three: annual return on the project, the timeline, and the risk factor. They were mainly the three: the risk in construction and DA and all of that sort of stuff. The time it would take to build all of that, and each exit strategy was assessed on its merit for the time and the return and the annualized return that each of the strategy will provide. And when this offer came about, this was the best way to exit it.
Easy. And so in order to do that, it's really removed the shared sewer and stormwater and water connections that are actually in here and install some dedicated services.
Yeah.
So you've got water at the front of the property, that's no problem at all. You've got sewer at the rear, that is going to be a little bit problematic, and we have to go through the neighbour's yard to actually do that.
Correct.
Luckily, they need to do some services at the same time, so it's just trying to coordinate that. Equally, you're working with the neighbour to actually demolish at the exact same time, because these buildings actually overlap each other's boundaries somewhat. So good to be working with the neighbour. How did that relationship come about? How did you approach the neighbour to go, we should work together because we're intertwined here?
We knew through the network in the area that the neighbours purchased it to build their dream home. And we knew they were pretty keen to demolish it, but there were so many issues that we know that they would have to go through it. So I approached them from that perspective that we have some experience and knowledge in the space of doing that and helping them. Essentially, I presented value for being associated with us in the form of competitive quoting. So we've got, for example, they've got a quote initially to demolish the whole site, twice as what they are currently paying right now by using the same demolition company that I'm using to demolish our site. And they're very pleased with it. And along the way, I'm also helping them through town planning for their trees removals and the fencing and all other aspects of it that we could help.
So that's the key, folks, is actually find their pain point, and if we can add value to actually solve their pain point, then that's when they're going to want to try and work with you. That's whether you're negotiating to buy a site, whether you're working access to the neighbour's property, all those sorts of things, because you're going to need to go through their property to install your sewer. So win-win-win, folks, that's the whole concept. Now, you mentioned trees, and right behind me is one of your trees that are protected, mate. What was the process that you had to do to actually try and get that removed? Because this is going to be pretty much in the middle of whatever is going to be the house block.
Yeah, that tree you see behind there, Rob, you're right, absolutely right. That is right bang in the middle of this particular block, which means this block would become unsellable in some way. So we put a VicSmart application for this tree to just remove one tree, and we got a permit issued to us in about 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, easy.
Within 2 weeks.
When I say easy process, but I guess always wherever there's a protected tree, folks, make sure you do check with your council. Sometimes every single tree is protected by default. Sometimes every tree is, I guess, able to be removed without checking with council, but they will be individually named trees that might be protected. No matter what the outcome, please make sure you check with your council. Don't just go taking trees out willy-nilly. So, mate, some fantastic lessons out of this particular project. Timeline for completion, so because you got a delayed settlement on this particular one as well, so that gave you some, so tell us about that negotiation process to get the delayed settlement, and how did that actually benefit you?
It benefited. Delayed settlement benefits people like us all the time, and because it just gives us time and space to get our planning in order, raise capital if we need to raise, and get through that process. So we got about 10 months of delayed settlement on this particular one. We negotiated it prior to, this site came about for an auction. We negotiated those terms prior to going into the auction, and so we were able to achieve that quite easily. And yeah, that helped us get our ducks in a row.
And that's an important fact, because a lot of people going to auction think that the terms that are actually put on the table are the only terms that you can actually purchase under. The reality is, folks, that you can actually go and negotiate, I guess, custom terms in the auction condition. Whatever you negotiate, though, I guess at the point of the hammer going down, the auctioneer is then going to offer those same terms to everybody else. So now they're not going to publicly advertise that, I guess, whilst they're doing the who's in, who's out kind of thing. Typically, most people are going to want to take that through straight away. But in your instance, that 10-month, as you said, gave you the timeline to actually get everything else prepared. It's the second time you've used delayed settlement type outcomes to your advantage, mate. And so you haven't yet settled on the property, but you're imminent on that?
No, we have actually settled on the property just a couple of months ago.
Yep.
And that's why we were able to get access to the site to do the demolition, strip off, and work on the utilities and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so demolition is going to happen almost any minute now. And then I guess once you've got the services installed, what's your timeline from settlement through to, I guess, the sale of the first property?
The first property was sold before we actually settled. A month before we settled this, we've signed a contract to sell the one of the blocks, and that settlement is coming up in about two months' time. So we provided them with a 4-month delayed settlement as well, while it gives us time to do the demolition work and utilities installation, and gives them the time to collect their plans and permits to the council. It kind of works for both of us to make that happen. We're expecting in the next by end of June potentially we would be exiting this deal, provided that we're able to sell the second block at a price at a target price, I suppose is the right word to use. But if we're unable to get the target price, it is already very, very de-risked in this, and the outgoings would be quite minimal. So that provides us with an option to just delay that project a little bit longer with really, really low outgoings or holding costs.
Yeah, and with that, so by selling that first property down, paying down the debt on this particular one, the minimal holding cost, I think you said just a couple of $100K to actually hold the site, which is very, very low. So that then means you can let the market do some heavy lifting if you really want to. There's also, I guess, the new Vic Smart rules that have actually come in that then allow the second block to potentially be turned into a duplex, and that's something that would be, I guess, explored to see whether or not the value is there in that. So you've got still, even with that one block left over, you've still got a couple of options left in how to get it out. So plan A, plan B, and all the way through to Z in your particular instances, mate. So congratulations on this particular deal. I guess from settlement through to cash in the bank from the first one, we're only talking 4 months, give or take?
Yeah, 6 months, 4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months. So that's good timelines, folks. If you can get that any day of the week, then that's easy money. So, mate, congratulations. For anyone, I guess, coming up, Krishna has presented his previous deals at our meetups here in Melbourne. We run these all the way around the country, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. And I'm looking forward to this one where we see the whole warts and all of the entire journey, mate. So congratulations, well done.
Thanks very much.
Super proud of you. And folks, we'll see you at the next Real Deal in the Field or one of our upcoming meetups. Till then, bye for now.
Bye.